right. Good after. All right. Hold on a second. Hey, good afternoon. My name is Dorothy Locke, like Kim said. I am the approvals manager in Lethbridge for Environment and Protected Areas, Regulatory Assurance Division South. Um, so my team, we review and process applications for approvals under the Water Act, as well as for the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act. Today, two of my team members, David Hunt and Jason Caford, will be presenting an overview of water specifically here in the South. So I'll turn it over to David and Jason now.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Hunt. I'm the water approvals team lead here in the Lethbridge office. I've been working with the Water Act since about 2001. And so I have another team member here with me, Jason Caford. Jason, please introduce yourself.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Jason Caford. I'm the water administration engineer here in Lethbridge. So kind of doing all things Water Act for approvals and licenses. I've been here in this role for about 12 years now.
Okay, so we're going to start off with the basics. Water management in Alberta. So the legal basis and fundamentals associated with the Water Act. And so where do we start our story? We started with the Northwest Irrigation Act. And the reason why they started the legislation was a significant investment in irrigation in southern Alberta. It was recognized that a significant amount of water would be used and that an allocation system would need to be put into place. And so the Northwest Irrigation Act was started. It was federal crown declared ownership of the water, and it was licenses for water use, and it started with the prior allocation system. As we progress on through, we were the Northwest Territories for a long period of time, and then the province was formed, and then it was a recognition that the provinces needed to take care of their own natural resources. So the Alberta Natural Resources Act was enacted in 1930, and it enacted the Natural Resources Transfer Agreement, which basically gave the province ownership over the water in most areas. There were some federal areas, such as national parks, where it's still administered in Alberta. The Water Resources Act then followed, so it superseded the Northwest Irrigation Act. Priority, first in time, first in right was maintained under this piece of legislation, and then progressed from there. We have the Water Act. So as of January 1st of 1999, the Water Act was enacted. There was lots of public consultation associated with this, lots of input, and that is some of the foundation for the Water Act today. So the ownership of all water is vested in the Crown, and it maintains first in time, first in right. Provides flexibility in times of water shortage, which you'll hear about coming up in the latter part of the presentation, where we'll talk about some of the instruments that we're using under the legislation for water shortage, as well as how people may obtain licenses in southern Alberta. The ability to appeal some decisions. So we have an environmental appeals board that was formed when the Water Act was put into place. Formally enables water management plans. So you'll hear about the South Saskatchewan River Basin Water Management Plan, the development of water conservation objectives, and it increased public consultation and allows for license transfers and holdbacks. And it doesn't support speculation in water use or the resource itself. So you need to have something that you're going to put on the landscape, something that's going to use the water in order to make application for diversion and use. So purposes of the Act, it governs how the province manages water. So we have outline in the Act, we have frameworks that we've developed associated with management of water and approved plans. It's to promote the conservation and management of water, including the wise allocation and use, promote economic growth and prosperity, and protect existing rights. So we're only going to go over one portion of the legislation. The two pieces that the Water Act administers are diversions of water, which may be completed under licenses, and approvals for an activity to impact the flow and levels and propose work within a water body. So we're basically only going to cover diversions of water, but there are notes that you will get that highlight the other instruments under the legislation and other authorizations. So a license grants an allocation of water and allows for the diversion and use. It provides right to use water, but it is not a guarantee associated with water. License system is, again, first in time, first in right principle, and it sets out a volume, a rate, and a timing. Also the source of supply and the purpose associated with the license. Incorporated in the licenses are relevant terms and conditions for the diversion and use of water. Licenses are under the Water Act. We now incorporate expiry dates associated with them. Basically, it comes up for renewal during certain time periods. Licenses, the terms are between 10 and 25 years, depending on the purpose. So this is the outline of what a license will have as a written record. So it'll have an annual volume. It'll have a diversion rate, a source and location. So all of this needs to be outlined and specified prior to building up prior to making an application for a resource. You need to have a point of use. It needs to have a purpose associated with it, and there would be a resulting priority number. Priority number is based on a completed application. Licenses and priority numbers, each license and then registration, which is the registration process was completed under the Act. This was associated with livestock use as well as pesticide application to land. It's given a priority number that corresponds to the date that the application was complete. Registrations, it was backdated to the first known date of use. A license which has an earlier priority date is considered more senior than a license which has a later priority date. And we'll show you a diagram of that in a second. All licenses other than household purposes are ranked according to seniority and not according to purpose. So in your notes that you'll receive, a household purpose, a person has a household statutory right if they own a parcel of land, they don't have access to municipal source of supply or community water supply through delivery of water through a distribution system. So priority of rights. So this is an example on the landscape. You've got a city that might have a 1970 license, a feedlot that might have a 1950 license, a couple of irrigators that might have various priorities, 1940 and 1960. And if somebody is not receiving their water under priority, under the priority system, then other users may be asked to reduce their diversions or cease their diversions until such time that the volume of water is satisfied. And that there's a whole process associated with that. So if the feedlot calls their 1950 priority, then we would review and determine where where the diversions may be occurring and whether people need to reduce or cease their diversion. So it's based on a priority system. It's not based on a purpose under the legislation. And there's various flexibilities that you'll hear associated with the transfer process too, as well, that we're managing through water shortage response. South Saskatchewan River Basin water management in a constrained basin. So how did we get here? How did we get to a basin where we no longer allocate water based on an application? We allocate based on a license transfer process. So water use considerations. Down here near the bottom, the bars indicate Alberta's share of the flow of water. We need to pass water to Saskatchewan. And so here's the flows as the years have gone by in terms of Alberta's share versus Saskatchewan's share. We take a look at how we've allocated water in the province over a period of time. So we have the introduction of the Northwest Irrigation Act. We have the irrigation development that has occurred over a period of time. This was major applications by basically major irrigation users in the system. As we progress through a period of time, we have PFRA that came in, or the Prairie Farm Rehabilitation Administration that came in the 1930s. We have construction of new projects, new dams, and the like in the 1950s. And this further increased the volume of water that was being allocated for use. We have new technologies that came in, such as new irrigation systems, new ways of using water. So we have a steady increase in the use of water through here. And then we have the final large allocation of water in southern Alberta associated with irrigation, and then a small progression to the end. So we've determined that at this point in time that there wasn't any further new allocations to be issued in the South Saskatchewan River Basin. So water use considerations and allocations today. So here is how water is being used in southern Alberta. So the charts show who holds the allocations for water. And if we take a look at the allocations in the Bow, the Oldman, and to a lesser extent, the lower South Saskatchewan Basin and the Red Deer River Basin, we can see that the majority of use is for irrigation. So we have 74% is used in the Bow River for irrigation, 19% is for municipal needs, and 7% is for other purposes. In the Oldman River Basin, we have 84% of the allocation is for irrigation, 3% is for municipal needs, and 13% added up here is equal to for other purposes. Lower South Saskatchewan, we have more municipal and industrial and commercial needs that are present in this particular basin. The Red Deer River subbasin is still open to new applications. The approved water management plan has highlighted, though, that there would be a limit to that. So there's an interim basin cap. When we reach that, then the allocations will be reviewed in the basin. So with regard to review of the basin and the allocation of water. So there was a public review process done under the South Saskatchewan River Basin Water Management Planning. What resulted was the approved water management plan. And an approved water management plan was signed off by the Lieutenant Governor and Council. It recommended closing the Bow, so this is Boss, Bow, Oldman, and South Saskatchewan rivers. And it created a Crown reservation. So that allows the department to reserve all water in a water management area that's been specified. It set interim allocation limits for the Red Deer, and then it provided the ability to establish water conservation objectives, so the protection of aquatic environment for anything additional above and beyond what we've already allocated. Enable water allocation transfers by the director. Up to 10% can be held back in a water conservation objective associated with a transfer. And it sets out the matters and factors to consider in the license transfer. So we need to review certain matters and factors as identified in the plan when we're reviewing for a transfer. So impact on other users, impact to the aquatic environment, the hydrology, the hydrogeology, etc. So from the recommendation of the approved water management plan, we then go to the order. So the Bow, Oldman, and South Saskatchewan Basin water allocation order. So it reserved the rest of the water in this basin area. All water not under a license, registration, or a preliminary certificate, which is a promise for water, is reserved by the Crown. And it reserved the surface water, including groundwater that is connected to surface water. So new licenses from the Crown reserved, the reservation was only for First Nations, water conservation objectives, water supply storage projects. So that would be for any storage project that the province might build to provide water for existing users within the basin, and pre-existing complete applications for a license or registration. Now I'm going to pass it over to Jason, and he's going to talk through the transfer process.
All right, thanks, Dave. So water license transfers. So prior to the Bow Oldman South Sask order and the approved water management plan, getting a license in the SSRB, as it is everywhere else, was relatively straightforward. You just kind of you applied, showed what your need was, how much water you need, and if the water was there, you were likely to get a license, which is no longer the case since the water management plan and the old Bow Oldman South Sask order have come out. Now, because the water is all reserved, the outside of upstream of the Old Man Reservoir, where there's a volume of water made available through the Old Man River Basin allocation order, the only way to get a license is through the water license transfer process. So as Dave already said, it was enabled by the approved water management plan for the SSRB. Basically, what a transfer is, it gives us the ability to detach a water license from a land or undertaking and move it somewhere else. So whether that be moving it from one point of diversion to a new point of diversion upstream or downstream on a river, or moving it so that it goes to lands that the original license did not authorize. This can be just a portion of a license that's it can be all of or a portion of a license, and that license has to be determined to be in good standing, which I'll get into on another slide. It can also be for a permanent or a fixed period of time. So it can be, and the fixed period of time is anything that that the transferor and the transferee would agree to when they're transferring the water. It could be to new or existing water users. So you could transfer it to somebody who's never used water before and is a new water user, or it can be somebody who's just looking for additional water for their operation. The priority of the existing license is transferred. So a senior license stays senior and a junior license stays junior. And speculation in the water is not allowed. Dave's kind of already gone over that, but you have to have a demonstrated need or purpose for that license. Right. So items to review when transferring water. So we have to look at water availability. Can't transfer where there isn't water. So basically, there's some water bodies that we can't consider transfers because there's based on allocated volumes, there just isn't the flow to support those types of those transferred licenses. So that's like the Sheep River and the Highwood River. Licenses need to be held in good standing to be transferred. So what does that mean? So basically, the licenses have to be operated within the conditions of their license, and they have to have a prospect of using the water. So it has to be built, they have to be following the conditions of their license. There must be a hydraulic connection between the points of diversion. So they have to be, and I'll go through this on my next slide, but the sources need to be in some way connected. So you got to be able to connect one drop of water to another drop of water. And I got some diagrams on the next page. Justifiable need and purpose. Again, you need to, the act doesn't promote speculation. You need to be able to justify that you need that volume of water and that there will be a purpose for it. And we have to consider impacts on aquatic environment and other users. We're moving water upstream and downstream. We're going to have people in between the points. We have to make sure that the impacts to those people are being mitigated. And same with the aquatic environment. Sometimes the timing of the diversions aren't going to be the same. The impacts can be different. So this is the first slide of my diagram. So basically this is that hydraulic connection piece, because the next one is next slide. The next slide deals with another situation. I'll just use that as well. So here you could kind of, you can go back to the other slide there, sorry. So if B was the Old Man River and A was the Bow River, you can't transfer between the two. The Old Man River, the Old Man water never goes up the Bow. The Bow water never goes up the Old Man. So that transfer is something that we wouldn't be able to consider. And now you go to the next slide, Dave, which is the smorgasbord of all the options. So A to B is kind of still that same situation. So if you took A to be the Bow, B to be the Old Man, and C and D to be the South Saskatchewan River, there's transfers that are possible, but there can be some restrictions. So if you're a transfer from the Bow to the South Saskatchewan River, so A to C, that's something that's possible. But if you were to transfer from C to A, you'd only be able to consider the portion that that is contributory to that source. So say 56% of the water comes from the Bow to the South Sask, you can only transfer 56% of the license up the Bow. Same with C to B, very similar. You can take everything from the Old Man downstream to the South Sask, but you can only take a portion from the South Sask up the Old Man. And then straight on the South Sask, that would be more acceptable. That whole volume would be eligible as well. So this is just kind of a slide breaking down the amount of transfers that we've done. So up since the water management plan was put in place, we've done over 300. We've done 388 transfers, which is accounted for over 71 million cubic meters of water. And with that 10% holdback that Dave was talking about, that the director is able to consider, we've also withheld 5 million cubic meters in water conservation objective licenses. So that's water that's no longer allocated in the basin, and it's to stay in the river. We have a guide for reasons why we would not take it, and that's available on our website. So water licenses. Where do you find licenses that you're looking to transfer on the Bow, Old Man, and South Sask River Subbasin? So water licenses in southern Alberta, typically we're finding that licenses are available mostly from people who are seeing efficiency gains. So people who are people who've put in technology so that they don't need as much water as they used to, and are looking to either expand or to give some of that, sell some of that water away. Or they're getting their supply of water from another user. So somebody potentially going to a district instead of taking water straight out of the river, and just have no need for that license anymore. A place you can find those licenses. So we do have a spatial tool that's available online. It's called the Alberta Flow Estimation Tool in Ungauged Watersheds, or a FETCU. Basically, it's just a data set with all licenses in Alberta. So you can go on there, query a source, and come up with all the licenses that come from that source, and you can see how much water there is, what the rate of diversion is, priority, all sorts of things like that. So it's available. We might have sent some links afterwards, but it's available online to everybody. We also have the Applicant Advisor Service Program. So basically, this was a program set up to try and assist applicants in making and getting as much information as they can early in the application process, so we could identify what they needed to do, what they needed, and how to be successful in an application process. It was started as a pilot program in the designated industrial zone of the province in the industrial heartland, and we've started piloting it in a broader context to confirm the viability or benefits. And so far it's been looking favorable. People have been seeing a lot of value in dealing with us early and trying to get some of those early considerations ahead of the game on them. So that's been working really well. So far, we've applied it to large-scale projects with linkages to economic recovery and regionally significant projects that typically have a grant or funding component or a timing window. And it emulates the outcomes we're striving to achieve with applications under our new regulatory assurance framework transformation. So an attempt for us to make sure that people are getting us the right information. We're spending less time reviewing the application and getting quicker and faster decisions. Right now, if people are interested in looking at this Applicant Advisory Service Program, it's recommended that they reach out to us directly if they want to obtain further information regarding the model. Water shortage response, so managing risk. So I'm going to get into talking about water shortage response plans. Something that's identified in the approved water management plan for the South Saskatchewan River Basin, but is a good idea for everybody. And we do have a guide for to try and assist people with creating water shortage response plans on our website as well. So it kind of it breaks down into first, you need to understand what your license is and what your source is. So figuring out what your location within your watershed is, what the historical flow is there, if you're downstream of tributaries, if there's other infrastructure like dams that's going to influence the flow to your site. Understanding your license. So what restrictions are on your license? Some licenses have a timing restriction, typically April 15th to July 31st. You could have in-stream objectives that need to be met at your point of diversion or on various points of portions of a creek. Same with water conservations, just a little bit more stringent than those in-stream objectives. And some licenses are also subject to operations plans. So licenses downstream of water management infrastructure might have conditions that just refer to the operations plan. So the expectation being that depending on the operations plans for that dam or reservoir, the people would need to follow that as well. Some other conditions of your license. So what's the priority date of your license? So that could let you know in a water shortage if there were some sort of a call to respect of somebody's priority of a license. How safe are you? Your license also has reporting. Reporting and plans. So making sure that you're following the conditions of those licenses. Say in a water, you need to look at some options. An important thing is making sure that your license is staying in good standing, because that does affect some of the options that are available to you under the Water Act. And what are some other things you should be considering? So if you have storage, what's the capacity of that and what are the losses? Maybe making sure that your storage is filled up and you're taking those things into consideration. If you have intake limitations, so maybe your intake is only good to certain water levels or water flows, and whether that might need some modification in a water shortage scenario. Also looking at precipitation data and current flow trends. So you'll see some websites at the end of the presentation that kind of show it houses those types of trends and talks about the precipitation data as well. So next slide, please. So after you've done that, now you need to look at mitigating your risks. So what are your options for water shortage? Is there an opportunity to access other sources of water? If your license has in-stream objectives, water conservation objectives, or if you don't have access to water when it's in low flows, maybe looking at constructing of storage. Looking at the priority of your license. If you're a bit of a junior priority, maybe you're looking to other people who have senior priorities who might be able to assign water to you. That means, which is sharing your priority, or looking at getting temporary transfers from other people. So those short-term transfers that I spoke about earlier, and also looking at options for water conservation. And then looking at your plan implementation. So coming up with your triggering criteria. So where are you going to start triggering various stages of your water shortage response plan? Is it based on river flows, reservoir levels? Is it based on the forecast? Also looking at developing a schedule for carrying out your water shortage response plan. You can't implement sometimes it's hard to implement various stages of your water shortage response plan overnight. So knowing how long it's going to take you and how do you and knowing if you need to speed up or slow down based on how a water shortage is progressing. And then also monitoring the effectiveness of the plan. So if you have to implement it, what's working well, what didn't, and should you be making any revisions to your water shortage response plan? So this is for water supply. We have our Alberta River Basins website and mobile app. So it's for Apple and Android devices. So you can see water supply forecast, the current water supply, all water shortage advisories and high flow advisories. So the website's that rivers.alberta.ca, and the app on the iOS App Store and Android Play Store is called AB Rivers. And here's the other smorgasbord of links that you're probably gonna need, but basically just kind of giving some of the documentation behind what we've been presenting today. So I think that's the end of mine. So I think we're open for questions now.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I don't have any questions in the chat. So if there's anybody that wants to put one in there or raise your hand or unmute, we can, oh, one just came in. Okay, so the question is out of the chat. I heard that Highwood is considered low and therefore water can't be transferred. Are we not concerned about the planned 1,000-hectare logging program at the head of the Highwood River and the implications it will likely have for communities using it as their source of drinking water?
So that would speak to the forestry end of things. So jurisdiction of the Water Act is basically water quantity and activities in water bodies themselves. So the forestry end of things, regulated by the province, would be the most appropriate location to direct the question to.
Thank you. Any other questions? What is the difference between irrigation, agricultural use, and industrial use?
Irrigation is the application of water for production of crops. Agricultural use is with regard to whether it's grazing livestock or feedlot purposes. Industrial use can be anything from industrial processing of oil and gas operations, or processing fertilizer operations. Commercial operations can be, there's a lot of food production in southern Alberta, those types of things. So.
Thank you. So some of our, another one coming from the chat. How are the major reservoir levels controlled? Is there a feedback loop from the downstream users to allocate flows to rivers downstream of reservoirs?
So there are basically two major operators of reservoirs in the province. The province operates some of our reservoirs, and there's some reservoirs that are operated on the bow system that are operated by TransAlta for power generation purposes. So they all have their own conditions associated with their licenses. There is an operating plan that is associated with those reservoirs. The operating plan specifies what the reservoir needs to, how the reservoir needs to be operated, and any special conditions associated with those reservoirs. So the Old Man Dam, for example, it's got an operating plan, and it needs to be operated according to satisfy in-stream objectives. One of the satisfiers is in-stream objectives downstream in terms of a base flow, and then operated for users, basically operated for multiple users downstream too as well. So including irrigation districts, municipalities, etc. So each one of them has, each project will have their appropriate conditions and operating plan.
Excellent. Thank you. So the copy, there was a question about having the copy of the recording. So that will be made available through our YouTube, and there is a PDF that we can send out to all the participants. But as far as distributing out some of these resources a bit more broadly, is that okay to send, the link to the watershed? Is there specific links that we can send out more broadly?
Yeah, we can send out basically we've got the department has web pages that and the majority of the links that we've got associated with the presentation is all under one web page. So we can highlight more links associated with our websites for sure.
Where have recent food processing plants, Cavendish, Whole Leaf Greenhouse, gotten their water licenses?
So producers or proposed producers or proposed operations will take a look throughout southern Alberta to figure out where they're going to get their water from. So it might be from existing users where they have capacity within their systems. It might be from water allocation transfers where they can obtain licenses from existing users, again, from whether it's efficiency gains or people that no longer are going to operate their systems anymore and want to move on from what they were doing. The FetchU site, basically speaking, that Alberta flow estimation tool for ungauged watersheds, you can take a look for licenses in there, but the majority of the users are doing one of those two things. Cavendish is within the city of Lethbridge, so they looked at various users within various existing users in southern Alberta to make their decision. So
thank you. For growing communities, how is water allocation managed when both the community and the surrounding agricultural industry have competing but demonstrated needs?
So growing communities, it doesn't matter what user you are. It doesn't matter with regard to the purpose. Any user that is in the in any basin, in any watershed in Alberta needs to look at their growth. They need to look at what they're projecting, whether they need to obtain a license through a water allocation transfer. As Jason had mentioned, there's a location in the Upper Oldman under the Oldman water allocation order that still allows for the allocation of water in and around and upstream of the Oldman Dam. So yeah, each user needs to determine what their needs are. It's not based on, Water Act is not based on a purpose, it's based on a priority, but you do have to specify what purpose and the need associated with the diversion of water.
Excellent, thank you. If there is a priority to households, why are Cowley, Lumbrick, Beaver Mines, and Pincher Creek affected by low flows and reservoir levels?
So household statutory right is a specific section of the Act. It's section 21 of the legislation. And what that speaks to is an individual user on, let's say, a quarter section of land that doesn't have access to municipal or other community distributed water supply. So they would have a well, or they would have, their own well, or their own surface water source where they would be using that water for their primary household. So it has to have a primary household, and it can be used for human consumption, sanitation, fire prevention, and the watering of lawns, gardens, trees, and animals. There's a specific quantity of water that is allowed for this, but again, you wouldn't be able to drill a well within a municipality and get obtain a household statutory right, because you have access to municipal water. It's reserved for what's specified in the legislation in terms of household purposes. So
thank you. As a resource, water is not speculative, but irrigation districts sell water rights and licenses sometimes have monetary value attached to them. How is that possible?
So that's administration within an irrigation district. I mean, it's similar to the transfer process under the Act in terms of, if somebody has a water right, the buyer and the seller can determine their transaction in terms of monetary transaction as to what they want to sell. We're not involved with that. The Water Act doesn't have the jurisdiction over that, but we have the jurisdiction over whether water can be diverted in that particular location and the conditions associated with that authorization. So I'd leave it up to the irrigation districts to answer that question, but it's a similar concept. So.
Thank you. Northback Holdings recently made a water request, according to the news, for water from the South Saskatchewan Basin for coal mining operations. Would this require a license transfer?
If there is no, so South Saskatchewan Basin, depending on how broad we're talking about, anything that is in the South Saskatchewan River sub-basin, it would require a water allocation transfer. If the South Saskatchewan Basin covers the Red Deer River Basin too as well, the Red Deer River Basin, again, under the approved water management plan, specifies a limit to a volume of water that's available. Then we'd start to review as to whether there's any further allocations available. But they could apply for a new license allocation on that, in that area. There's a limitation in terms of making application for industrial purposes on the Upper Oldman under that Oldman water allocation order, and an application is already in place associated with that volume of water that would be available in the Upper Oldman. So those are the two opportunities in the South Saskatchewan River Basin.
Thank you. Does a license need to be used every year to be considered in good standing?
A license doesn't need to be used every year. There's going to be situations in Southern Alberta where you don't have access to water. Some of them are, in around Medicine Hat area and the Milk River Basin sometimes. The license needs to remain in good standing according to what information we've provided. It needs to be able to continue to be operated. The cancellation section of the Act speaks to 3 years been used within the last 3 years, and a reasonable prospective use. So if infrastructure and stuff is in place to be used, the project can be used, it is in good working order, then it doesn't need to be used absolutely every year. So
thank you. You may have answered this in your last question, but you had mentioned that priority is not based on water use, but is there such a thing as people first, then livestock, fish, etc.?
There's flexibility in the Act associated with managing of water during water shortage, and the department has, we go through our own water shortage response. There is the tools under the legislation that we talked about. There's assignments, there's temporary transfers and the like. If we ever got into a serious water shortage situation, then we would be looking at managing water based on purpose, and that would be done through the minister under the Act. So it would be the declaration of an emergency. So we haven't got there yet, but all that stuff is reviewed by the department, especially during a water shortage. So.
Thank you. With the announcement of new irrigated acres coming to Southern Alberta, where is that water coming from?
So that water would be coming through efficiency gains. There's been significant infrastructure and investment made in irrigation districts to increase efficiency gains. If you want further information associated with that, then I'd be looking to the irrigation secretariat to review or to answer more of that information. But in terms of what we've seen for the productivity and efficiency gains in recent history, I don't know what the exact numbers are right now, but there's been a within the last 7 years, it's probably 7 years ago or 6 years ago, there was 28% efficiency gain by the irrigation districts by moving water into pipelines and ceasing the use of a lot of open canals and those types of things, smaller infrastructure that has assisted them.
Excellent. It looks like I have one more question left in the chat, so I'm going to ask that. And then I think we can open it up for a bit more of a casual discussion. I've kind of been rapid fire peppering David with questions. And so I'll ask this last one and then have maybe a bit more of a casual conversation just to ride out the last few minutes. So Cowley water source is the Old Man Dam Reservoir. What priority was there for that? It didn't seem it was a high priority as they were hauling water in trucks since August. These are communities that watch the dam drop and their water go with it.
Yeah. So in southern Alberta, there's a need to recognize where you're, and it doesn't matter what user you are, but there's a need to recognize that there will be water shortage situations. So when Jason walked through water shortage response, where is your source of supply? What is the operating plans associated with the projects? So that, like I said, the Old Man Dam has an operating plan associated with it. And many users in Southern Alberta will, and many municipalities included, many of them have storage in order to work through a water shortage. Others have other sources of supply that they are using too as well. That's not a hit against any one user. You know, though these things do take time, and some things come up that are unexpected. So you know that there are a few users that are out of the reservoir. There's a few users that are downstream that the department has been working with associated with water shortage. They are in emergent use of systems such as secondary pumps and those types of things in order to make sure that they have their sources of supply, because their intake systems are out of the water. Yeah, it does happen in southern Alberta, and it's something that you know, every user should take a look at in terms of their water shortage response. So
yeah, I appreciate that. I'm going to stop the recording here, and